Okay, it's time to go. This is the Convo Norm along with Mike. Sunday, February 19th, 2023. The Leafs a 5-1 winner over Les Habitants at Scotiabank Arena last night with Ryan O'Reilly and Noel Acciari in the lineup. They were able to expedite themselves from a travel perspective from wherever St. Louis was to Toronto because they just had to be a part of the blue and white. The big trade, 48 hours old, Michael. The Leafs have a win in their back pocket. It's in Chicago tonight. Wowee. Summarize the best way you can, sir. Good morning.
Good morning, Norm. As you said before we went live, there was a lot of excitement, and I did a Leaf talk on Twitter Spaces after the deal, and was on the air until about 1:30 in the morning, with a lot of fans who were like, some were questioning whether it was right to expend the draft capital that the Leafs did in this deal, and I think that is a legitimate concern. But let's deal with the deal itself. They give up 3 draft picks to St. Louis, along with 2 minor leaguers, Adam Gaudette and Mikhail Abramov, a first in 23, a third in 23, which was the third-round pick they got from Ottawa in the Matt Murray deal, and a second in 2024 for Noel Acciari and Ryan O'Reilly. And they filtered O'Reilly's $7.5 million salary through Minnesota. They retained 25%. Now, this is the weird thing. They retained 25% of the cap hit, the actual money, and Elliot Friedman explained this last night. It turned out to be like $75,000 in real money that Minnesota had to pay to get a 4th-round pick. So it made a lot of sense for them to do that. And then the reason for that is O'Reilly had a heavy signing bonus at the beginning of the year, so his real salary, I think, was only $1 million, something like that. And prorated, it was only 75 remaining. So, a good deal for Minnesota. They used up their cap space and they get a 4th-round pick. It's a good deal for St. Louis because they get 3 draft picks for a guy that they probably weren't going to be able to sign. At least he was not willing to take. Apparently, the St. Louis didn't want to go long term on O'Reilly. But St. Louis is not making the playoffs, and they already traded Tarasenko. So everybody knew that they were going down this road. How it equates to the Leafs, and last night you saw O'Reilly playing on the at center with Tavares moving to the wing, with Mitch Marner. I don't believe that is what is going to be his role going down the stretch. Now,
Right.
what they
trade him though. Prime time. Let's go. Welcome to Toronto. Come on, integrate yourself with the big timers, the guys who lead the way, and things will calibrate afterwards, right?
Yeah.
So why would you just come on the 3rd or 4th line and have him play 7 minutes? This was a big deal.
Yeah. Well, okay. What I was, I think what Sheldon Keefe wanted to do yesterday was, like you said, integrate them into the lineup and make them feel comfortable. And that's Acciari playing center and O'Reilly playing center with talented line mates who knew where they were going. So, but I think after a few practices, and they play 3 games in 4 nights, Montreal, Chicago tonight, and then into Buffalo on Tuesday. After that, there's a few-day break. They'll be able to have some practices, and maybe then I think what will end up happening is what I think is going to end up being his role, which is 3rd-line center. And not 3rd-line center in terms of like playing 12 minutes. I think he'll play elevated minutes. I think it'll be a matchup situation because O'Reilly is a defensive center along the lines of a Patrice Bergeron. He's won a Selke.
Yep.
Now, he's not as fast as Bergeron is, and he's not a fast player, but he's a smart player, positionally very sound. So I do believe they're not going to put all their eggs in one basket and have O'Reilly and Tavares playing out of position. I think what they're going to do is, Matthews on one line, Tavares on another line, O'Reilly on the third line, moving David Kampf down to the fourth line, Acciari moving to the wing. But Acciari is a right-hand shot, and he can take face-offs on the right side. So it gives the Leafs a lot of flexibility, and I do believe that once Sheldon Keefe gets practices in, that's what O'Reilly is going to be.
This is the Convo, Norm along with Mike. Like the content, subscribe to the channel. Don't forget the podcast portion of this content will be on the platform of your choice within the next day or so. So if you want to listen to us after the fact, and while you're on a run or you're doing a workout or you're at work, go ahead and do that too. We appreciate all comers. Noel Acciari, 5 hits last night, 14 minutes, 22 seconds of ice time. Feisty guy with some of that Boston blood. Mike, he was in a Stanley Cup final against his buddy Ryan O'Reilly a few years back and was a part of that Bruins team in 19 that was down 3-2 against the Maple Leafs, and obviously we know how that history went. As for O'Reilly, picked up his first point as a Leaf, 86% on the face-off, a little bit of power play time, a bit on the shorthanded end of things, 16 minutes 12 seconds. So again, there's as you mentioned, when there's some downtime and they can just get to work on systems and stuff like that. I mean, these guys will pick it up pretty quick. But for two dudes entering the city amid so much fanfare and so much hype and expectation against the Habs team that beat them not too long ago, I mean, they did a really nice job. And add to that all of the mostly the support guys like Pierre Engvall and David Kampf, and of course Michael Bunting picking up the goals, which is what we kind of wanted with guys like Morgan Rielly joining the fray. More contributions from dudes who you don't see on the score sheet every day. And I don't know if they're you can associate one with the other, but it just seemed like especially into the second period last night, things really coming together. It was just it was wonderful. It was nice to see.
Well, I mean, as many Leaf fans, I mean, if they went 1-81 in a regular season, the one victory they'd want is against the Habs.
Right.
And when the Habs beat them, it's particularly aggravating. And they lost the 2 games in Montreal opening night, and then won when the day after Cole Caulfield is out for the year and Rem scores in overtime. So last night when Josh Anderson, who is the prototypical definition of a Leaf killer, scores to open the scoring at 1-0, I'm sure Leaf fans are like, great, here we go. But they turned it around in the second period. They got a few goals. I have to, it can't be lost that Joseph Wall played really well.
Yep.
And, so I mean, he's played great in the minors, and he played really well last night, bouncing back from a bad game against Columbus. But it really was a bad game overall for the team, so I can't really slag on the young kid. But he played really well last night, and then until Matt Murray comes back, I think Wall's going to get the occasional game, and Samsonov might be back tonight, and might be Shalgren tonight against Chicago. But it was a nice bounce back effort against a bad team. They really can't put a lot of stock into what they did against Chicago, because Chicago is possibly the worst team in the league.
Well, hold on a sec there, Mike. We've been on this Maple Leafs team for not stepping on the throats of opponents.
Sure.
Super vulnerable. They did.
They did, but
can't make something of it.
They did, but that game was 3-2 against Chicago, and a very sloppy game. And even Sheldon Keefe was like, he was pleased they got the 2 points. He was not pleased with the way they played. Last night, they played a much smarter game, and you could see the seeds of what is going to happen with O'Reilly. I mean, O'Reilly is a very positionally sound player, makes good decisions, is good along the wall, wins faceoffs. I mean, his faceoff percentage before the trade, I believe, was like 53%. And that's really good. And that was the worst faceoff percentage he's had in about 6 or 7 years.
Right.
So last night he goes 12-2 on draws. So there is an indication of, defensive zone draws. It's not going to be
Right.
Tavares and Camp all the time. Now you mix O'Reilly, and now you mix Acciari, who's a 53 or 54% face-off guy as well. So it increases the depth up the middle of the organization.
We have OGs and converts in the chat, many of them discussing amongst themselves. Mike, I'm just going to roll through some comments here. I'm just going to pick randomly. You don't have to respond.
And some questions if people have questions.
Yeah, and I'll get to it. Brad Tyndall, we've anointed Brad Tyndall an OG. Not here from the very beginning, but just like rising through the ranks of the Jedi. Brad, you are officially an OG. If that means anything to you, that's awesome. O'Reilly is an enormously special, competitive, inspiring person. I love to hear that take, because you could sense just on social media, amongst fans, people I know who follow the Maple Leafs, who come to me and watch the podcast and want to bounce things off of me. Everyone's really excited, Mike. It's like Owen Nolan coming to Crazy Town 15 plus years ago. It's great. And I think, when you talk about draft picks being expended, I'm sorry, if you don't have draft capital to barter something that represents potential success or something down the line for something that you can do here in the now because you feel like you have a chance to make a step, then don't be in this business. But people really sense that you've got a real solid guy with pedigree who actually does fit into a deficiency and a hole in the lineup, right? So just inspiring and special. He may turn out to be just that, and if it's only for a short period of time, and the Leafs can get to a deeper place than they've been in years, then they're just going to have to, we'll just have to accept that. Mike, maybe you make a comment about that, and I'll find something else for us to read here.
Well, and you referenced for a short period of time, and I was of the
possibly.
Yes, and I was of the opinion that was, because Kyle Dubas sort of after about a week, went away from what he said last week about, well, I don't want to trade first-round picks for rentals. Well, maybe Ryan O'Reilly may not be a rental. Pierre LeBrun came out yesterday and said that O'Reilly, the Leafs were going to be on his short list on July 1 as a free agent. Now he's been traded there. Now, Kyle Dubas was very careful to say, well, we're not going to talk about contract extension now. It's like, let's see, basically, let's date before we make a marriage here. That is a good thought. And, Kyle Dubas might not be general manager in a couple of months. So, he's not going to go down that road. But I do think that if it's a fit, if he plays well, if he fits with the dynamic of this team, which I don't see any reason why he wouldn't, that now, obviously, he is we know the resume that he has. He's from Clinton, Ontario. His wife is from Toronto. You could see the video on social media of his kids watching their dad in blue and white and all excited because the grandparents
at the game.
Yeah, the grandparents are from so it's all the things like Muzzin, who's from I think Woodstock, like Tavares, who's from Toronto, like Michael Bunting, who's from Scarborough. You're tapping into the family pull of players who Mitch Marner from I think he's not from Markham, but he's from the GTA. But all these players, I mean, it's not a guarantee that just because they're from Toronto, they want to play in Toronto, but there are players who do. And if you look at the way things line up, and I think the Dubas is looking at this, Alex Kerfoot's $3.5 million drops off the salary cap at the end of the year. David Kampf at $1.5 million. They probably don't re-sign him the way he's played. They might want him back, but they have a fourth line replacement in Pontus Holmberg. they could say they could give O'Reilly $5 million. That might be competitive on a 4 or 5 year deal. And if you slot him in between or behind Matthews and Tavares up the middle, they rival what the Bruins are doing, and they rival what Tampa Bay is doing. So it may not be just a rental deal. That's my point. But that being said, I mean, I think Kyle Dubas, Mike Zeisberger from NHL.com, basically said, this is taking Dubas out of his comfort zone. And in a way it is, because he was quick to say, I would have done this deal had my contract not been up. But honestly, it's like I as much as he says it's not a factor, I do believe it's a little bit of a factor. I think he wants to finish the job in Toronto. He wants to win a Stanley Cup in Toronto. It's sort of like Theo Epstein with the Boston Red Sox back in the day. Mm-hmm. What made him Theo Epstein? Breaking the curse of the Babe, breaking the curse of the Bambino, then going to Chicago and breaking the 100-year whatever the curse was of the Cubs.
Do it with Moneyball, Mike, and that's the thing. You can't just, plug in what ifs into your spreadsheet and into your computer and say, well, this guy's going to slot here. This guy's going to slot here. Here's what he's going to get paid. Here's where we're going to be relative to the cap. And it will just all work out. Kyle Dubas doesn't operate in a bubble or a vacuum. And coming out of his comfort zone is that's to be expected, but this is good for him, right?
Yeah.
He's done this. Sorry, Mike. He's done in years past. I mean, we've, as Joe Thornton, Zach Bogosian, Nick Foligno,
right?
But he hasn't really deviated from the plan in general, which is fine. Which is fine. But again, in these moments, whether his job is on the line or he feels as comfortable as anybody could, just based on entitlement. And I'm not saying he feels that way, but either way, he's got to make these moves at this point to do something to try and elevate his team, because it's getting redundant, it's getting old. We know it. He knows it as somebody who just is probably excited to watch good hockey and wants to be a part of something that goes deep into the spring. So this is what happens. And the people who lament capital being expended, give me a fucking break, man.
Well, I think
it's part of the job. It's part of the deal. And he's done well. And some of the coaches and conference have made this point. He's done well drafting in the later rounds.
Yes, but
now you get paid, man. But these first round picks, sure, no one wants to just get rid of them. But
I think the important thing here, Norm, is yes, you can take the philosophy, and I'm not saying you're doing this, but you can take the philosophy of Cliff Fletcher and say draft schmaft. No. But when it's the 2023 draft is one of the stronger drafts in probably a decade, right. And you have 3, maybe 2 picks, because they may have a third round pick if Arizona decides to take the second round pick in 2025 from the Nick Ritchie deal. Basically you're going to Nashville in June to enjoy the hot chicken. So it's like, it is a factor, and organizationally, but the point that, and this is where I think Zeisberger's point is correct. Is correct. He's out of his comfort zone, not only because he traded draft picks, but he didn't double down on skill. He didn't go for Timo Meier and load the top 6 with another skilled forward. He got a gritty 2-way center in O'Reilly, who provides a different aspect to this team. Now, he's not a goon. He's not a massively physical guy, but he's, in the playoffs, he's a sandpapery guy who will match up with, Braden Point or Anthony Cirelli or Nick Paul, and against Tampa Bay, and will provide them something that they didn't have. And Acciari lengthens and improves their lineup up front. If they had gone for a Timo Meier, then I would have said this is basically Dubas doubling down on skill, and instead he went all in. Sorry, what was that?
I believe it would have cost more too.
Yes, and that was the point that Elliot Friedman made, and put those two things together. Friedman said they opted for O'Reilly because the cost was too much. The Leafs gave up draft picks in the O'Reilly deal. Dubas said we opted to give up the mystery box, which was draft picks, rather than give up prospects in the pipeline. Put 2 and 2 together. That means San Jose wanted Matthew Knies. And I've said for 2 months they were going after Ryan O'Reilly, and I've said for a while they were not trading Matthew Knies. And we're at February 19th, and what happened? They traded for Ryan O'Reilly, and they didn't trade Matthew Knies. Thank you very much.
OG's Converts right now in the chat, pay homage to this wonderful Italian-American or American-Italian from Western New York, the one and only Michael P. Augello. He called this. What will you call for us next, my friend? That is what we're all waiting with anticipation to find out. Chris Daniels with something here.
By the way, this is Karnak. I'm doing Karnak.
Yeah. Chris Daniels, this is good. The reality is we aren't going to re-sign Nylander and Matthews. We had to go all in this year because we were probably going to trade Nylander in the off season. Interesting.
Okay. I'll slightly disagree. Nylander and Matthews are both up at the end of the year, or at the end of next year. Matthews, they will not let Matthews, because he, similar to John Tavares with the Islanders, he has a no move clause, similar to I think Dylan Larkin in Detroit. They have no move clauses that kick in on July 1st. Austin Matthews will be signed to an extension before July 1st. They will pay him whatever he wants. He will be the highest paid player in the NHL. I do not doubt that. That will be priority A for Dubas or priority A for whoever the general manager is for this team. As for Nylander, I mean, he's having a great year. He's played really well all year. He hasn't had his Mr. Willie vacation yet, and I'm hoping he doesn't, because they need him to play at this level. He's under contract at $7 million with no trade protection. I think they're going to let it ride until the deadline, and if they can't get him signed, then I think then there's a decision that's going to have to be made. I said this, I think on our last show, there's going to be a reallocation of funds when it comes to the core four, because John Tavares at age 34 or 35 is not going to be an $11 million player, and he realizes that. And if he wants to stay in Toronto, which I think he does, he'll probably have to take a lesser salary, like say Joe Pavelski did in San Jose, and then later in Dallas as an older player. He's still going to be a contributor, but they're going to have to reallocate funds to give to Marner, to give to Nylander, to give to Matthews, to give to O'Reilly if they want to sign him, to give to Michael Bunting. That's just that's where things are going to go. That's a concern for the summer. Right now, they're just trying to get as much talent on this roster under the cap before March the 3rd. And I know that there were some questions in the chat about defense, and I'll answer them in a little bit. But I just think that right now, the biggest thing that we can take from this whole thing, Norm, is the deal that they made didn't touch this roster. It added to it. And that was the biggest thing. They didn't want to subtract. They didn't want to shake up the esprit de corps, the confidence, the camaraderie of this team. They wanted to add to the group, and they did.
Management didn't want to dismantle what it has currently. Fans would certainly like to see some pieces supplemented.
Number three.
Alex Kerfoot. Again, easier said than done. And it's remarkable. We get caught up in this too. We think a player is shit, so trade him. So someone else is going to want to take your shit. I don't think so. Corey Parrish with a good one here. I like this. Mike, I don't want to be right, but the deadline is March 3rd. Knies could still be dealt. Let's not get excited yet.
Oh, no. There is not a first of all, if they're trading Knies, it would be.
I mean, again, who is it? But would you trade him for a top four defenseman with term?
Right, but they can't. That's the problem. They can't fit a top four defenseman.
Okay.
In terms of salary, they can't fit it. So I mean, right now I think they're limited in terms of what they can fit under the cap to somebody like a Luke Schenn or a Scott Mayfield from the Islanders. Mayfield makes, I think, $1.4 million. Schenn makes $850,000, something like that. And right now, I don't think there's a player out there that they would be willing to trade Nyes for, simply because now they've traded a lot of their draft capital. Now they're even more dependent on their young prospects already in the pipeline to come up and be players in the organization. Expect this team to sign more undrafted free agents, college free agents, KHLers, because that will make up for draft picks that are not in the pipeline. But I don't think that, they're not in on Chychrun. They're not in on Gavrikov. They're not going to try. I would be dumbfounded if all of a sudden, on top of trading their 2023 first, they trade their 2024 first, or Nyes or Sandy. No, I don't think it's likely. I don't think they're trading for Jake McCabe or Connor Murphy like Jeremy in the chat. I think they're limited in terms of, and I've narrowed down the two. Schenn makes a lot of sense. Right hand shot, physical. Wow. But they see
we don't even talk about this. Like, sorry, I get shit on for swearing, but I like it. And smart people swear. But also too, I just get excited about it. So Luke Schenn, OG's Converse. Who's old enough to remember when Luke Schenn joined this club? He was rushed. This guy was like, you want to talk about somebody who was shit on and who got the raw end of the deal and who was just thrown to the wolves, and really, like, again, a big draft pick who had the weight of the world on his shoulders and just wasn't able to deliver here. Right. There was a game where Schenn had fanned on a couple of shots and had it resulted in some goals against. I think it was the Ron Wilson era, Mike. I
think so.
Was it maybe Palmer? No, maybe not that far back.
No, it was Wilson.
Fanned on a couple of shots, and the fans, were just they had enough of this guy. And then he made a shot, and they all cheered. And Pierre Fire, that Habs loving whatever he is, made a comment about how horrible that treatment was, right? And here's a guy who, anytime a Habs fan would get on Carey Price or somebody, it was passion, right? But the Leaf fans were just terrible to mockingly cheer a guy who had struggled throughout the game. It was just terrible. And then all these years later, Luke Schenn's a guy we don't like to come back and help support the defensive crew to help strengthen it and give it just a little bit more of an extra look, more size, more body, and potentially elevate it, right? Isn't it?
Well, I mean, we have to say that, when that was going on, Luke Schenn was a 5th overall pick,
right,
picked in the same draft as Drew Doughty and no, what was it? I'm sorry, it was Bogosian, Alex Pietrangelo, and Doughty. Yeah, so that draft. So he was 5th, and of the 4 defensemen, he was I mean, one of them, Doughty's a Hall of Famer, and Pietrangelo might be a Hall of Famer. Bogosian's a solid guy, but has had his issues. Schenn was the worst of the 4.
Big guy from the prairies.
Right? But he had a great rookie year, and then, like as you said, he was promoted too early. Like, go down the line, folks. You look in your Leaf history: Jim Benning, Gary Nyland, Luke Richardson, all these defensemen that they brought up way too early, rushed them. The one guy that they brought up early and it didn't hurt them was Morgan Rielly. Morgan Rielly was brought up at 19 years old. So I'm just saying, like, now the targets have been adjusted. He's not a top pairing defenseman. He's a bottom pairing guy.
So Morgan Rielly was obviously a different kind of defenseman, right?
Sure.
More of a puck rusher, a leader, whereas Schenn was a big body. He was supposed to be next Chris Pronger, right?
Right, that was the hope. Yeah,
was not traded for James Van Riemsdyk.
Yes, 1 for 1.
Right. But again, like what happened, and Luke Schenn's good for him. He's carved out a career, and again, not everybody has to be a Bobby Orr, but now to be on the radar, to come back and augment a Maple Leafs group when they couldn't get rid of him fast enough, 10 years ago. It's crazy. It's just crazy how things unfold. Mike, I don't know if you have anything else to add. I know the OGs and converts are super fired up. This is exciting. Like I'm really excited, and we people do come down on us, and right, that's fine, about how we are negative. I think we're just more realistic. But today, like, I'm excited. Like the Kyle Dubas has made a trade that you had prognosticated correctly. Congratulations. But we believe, and many people believe, for now, it helps improve this group. It makes sense. They need depth forwards, and not only did they get a guy like Ryan O'Reilly, but a Noel Acciari, who's got experience, who's a heavy guy, who throws his weight around, doesn't fight. He's not a goon, but that kind of guy too. Like, he's not the hidden component here, because he's in plain sight and he's a part of the trade. We know he's there, but there's a guy who may pay as many dividends as Ryan O'Reilly when it all shakes out. The last couple out of here.
Yeah, it does improve the team. It doesn't guarantee a thing, as we know.
No, we know.
Right. So I mean, I think they have a better fighting chance against a team like Tampa. But I watched Tampa last night play against Vegas, and Vegas won 5-4. And even when they scored an empty net goal, Tampa scored with like 10 seconds left, and it was like they were dead and they didn't know that they were dead. And this team is so talented. So the Leafs are going to have to be at their optimum to beat the Lightning. But go ahead.
You mentioned that the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Boston Bruins, teams that design themselves or figure themselves to be among the elite, and where hockey really starts in the playoffs. They play with their hair on fire, but at what point does that fire start to peter out and dwindle? Like, what we talk about kind of just being back against the Lightning year after year, and you lose, you'll finally win.
It might peter.
Something maybe are the Lightning at any kind of point where you see what this whole ride is about to, at some point, going to come to an end? By default,
it might, but I don't think the Leafs can depend on Stanley Cup hangover, or I mean, you've seen like teams that are successful. They say, well, the extra games and the physical wear and tear piles up on them, and then eventually, like the Islanders or the Oilers and the that it just wears on them. I don't think the Leafs can depend on that to happen with Tampa. They're an immensely talented team with star players in their prime. Stamkos is still one of the best players in the NHL. So is Kucherov. So is Hedman. So is Vasilevsky. And it's endless. So they're going to have to rise to the occasion. But here is the only criticism, and there's nothing they can do about this. If Kyle Dubas, as Elliot Friedman reported last night, was wary of the fact that the Rangers made the deal for Tarasenko, and the Leafs had to strike to get O'Reilly before some of the big impact players at the deadline were off the market. And they moved early, and maybe they gave up an extra draft pick, or maybe they gave up a 2023 first instead of a 2024 first to make that happen. But the only negative is by moving early, you give Julian Brisebois, the GM of Tampa, and you give Don Sweeney, the GM in Boston, the opportunity to respond. If you make a deal on March the 3rd at 1:00, they don't have an opportunity to respond. And, we know Boston is in on Gavrikov. They're in on Chychrun. They seem to be looking for a left defenseman. Tampa Bay, there's rumors of them being in on Tyler Bertuzzi, although Detroit might not trade him because they're in a playoff race right now. So these guys, if at all possible, will respond. And I think the Leafs have one move left in them, which is a depth defenseman. But I don't think they have much more than that. So I don't know, as I don't know who it was, I can't remember, said about them trading Matthew Nyes. I don't think it's happening.
So as much as the Leafs are trying to improve and preparing for, destination Tampa in the first round, but by no means are the Lightning, who many believe are still the favorite to win the series and have the pedigree and the experience. By no means are they thinking they've got it wrapped up. They're going to make the moves that they need to make because they see the Leafs working, right? And with Boston, playing with its hair on fire and being so damn good, there's obviously a sense of paranoia there too that's quiet, that's hidden, amid the confidence that, hey, it could all unravel on us as well. So anything we can do to strengthen our position, we certainly will do. So, we got a quiet arms race going on here. It'll be interesting to see how Boston and Tampa, not so much react to what the Leafs do by doing something, but making a move that benefits them on their own terms, as the collective group of teams that may be facing off here in the next couple of months in the postseason do the same kind of things. Mike, any last words? OG's Converts, thanks so much for being here. Tons of people in the chat. Like the content, subscribe to the channel. We've got many more Leafs Convos to go, leading up to what we hope is going to be a playoff run. We shall see. And then we'll have a few more collaborations as we get closer to March 3rd. Mike, any last words?
Just a couple quick things here. Corey Parrish brings up something that somebody on social media brought up yesterday, and it's laughable.
What is it?
Ryan O'Reilly is not Wendell Clark. Only Wendell Clark is Wendell Clark. Please stop. I mean, Wendell Clark.
You are Clark's biggest fan.
Yes,
and man, so don't sacrilege.
Right, and I mean, don't get me. Ryan O'Reilly, first of all, he's a center. Second of all, he's not somebody who is going to lay out people like Wendell laid out Bruce Bell. I mean, or Marty Mix, or the Marty McSorley laid out Doug Gilmour. It's I would love to see a Wendell Clark player with the Leafs, but that's not O'Reilly.
Is there even anybody?
There isn't. There isn't. He's a unicorn. Now, for all those who are infused with confidence, the Leafs are going to Buffalo on Tuesday. Let me give my fans and friends in the Southern tier in Southern Ontario a friendly word. Don't go. Don't go to Buffalo. If you're going down there to enjoy chicken wings, to enjoy the Galleria Mall, fine. If you're going down there to enjoy the Leafs winning in Buffalo, don't go. I mean, okay, imagine Sabres fans have a boner for Ryan O'Reilly because Ryan O'Reilly a few years ago said, I don't want to be the part of this, basically this losing organization. And at that point they were. Sabres fans should thank Ryan O'Reilly because by that trade, Ryan O'Reilly won a Conn Smythe and a Stanley Cup in St. Louis, and Buffalo got Tage Thompson. So, it was helpful to and I think that was the beginning of starting the changeover of the Sabre organization. But if you're going down to Buffalo to watch the Leafs win, don't go.
You need some therapy, brother.
And it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen.
We hope at the end, when all is said and done, this was somewhat therapeutic. But every time we feel like we're making progress, we regress. If it's not one thing, it's the next. Here we go. Spike 11. Mike and Norm, do you think the Leafs have the coaching and goaltending to win a 7-game series against Tampa and Boston, who both have a better coach and goalie?
Okay.
Just to kind of temper the enthusiasm, Mike.
Okay, John Cooper could be the best coach in the NHL. So saying he's a better coach than Sheldon Keefe does not mean that Sheldon Keefe is not a good coach.
Right.
I mean, of course, everybody is going to say Sheldon Keefe, hasn't won a series, so he's not a winner. Well, he won a Calder Cup, and so I think that counts for something.
In fact, you've won.
Sorry, say that again.
What how do you quantify this? And he's won, so he's a good coach.
Yeah, I mean,
Is that it? What makes him a better coach tactically and in game than somebody like Sheldon Keefe?
please, people were criticizing John Cooper when he lost to John Tortorella and he got swept when they were the best team in the league and they got swept by Columbus. So, Cooper has been there. He lost in 2015 in the Stanley Cup final to Chicago. So, he's taken his slings and arrows and now he's a championship coach. So, I think Sheldon Keefe is a good coach. Now I think he has more tools to work with in terms of a roster.
Right.
I don't think the Leafs were up to the talent level of Tampa, and I still don't think they're equal to them, but they're close. I do think Sheldon Keefe is as good a coach. What has Jim Montgomery won?
Mm-hmm.
He's a good coach, but he hasn't won anything. And what has Linus Ullmark won? Matt Murray's won 2 Stanley Cups. Okay, and I'm sorry, I will continue to say, and everybody will in the chat will probably lose their minds. Matt Murray will probably be back by February 28th. And in spite of how good Ilya Samsonov has played, and I think the Leafs are very fortunate that they have Ilya Samsonov. Game 1 of the first round, if he's healthy, Matt Murray's your goalie.
Mark Dag. Any relation to Alexandre?
We had. I think we had somebody with the last name of Tanti in the chat, so that might be Tony Tanti's relative.
These guys are amazing. I'm looking forward to watching the naysayers lose their minds. I think I know what he means. Yeah, I do. And here's the thing about the Leafs goaltending. There are 4 guys. You got 4 guys. If one's injured, the other's sick. The backup tandem, they're raring to go. Joseph Woll's a good goaltender. And don't forget what Erik Källgren contributed to this team when things were falling apart at the early going.
Right now, Vegas is on goalies 3 and 4. Aiden Hill and Laurent Boisseau. It's like Logan Thompson's hurt, Robin Leonard's hurt. It's not unique, but I have a feeling that if the Leafs make a long playoff run, which everybody in the chat is hoping, and this will be the last thing, if the Leafs make a long playoff run, it's going to be like 67, where Bauer and Sawchuk both played.
Right.
And like in 2006, when the Carolina won the Stanley Cup, Martin Gerber and Cam Ward played. There are very few teams in the league right now. Ottinger with Dallas, Shesterkin, Sorokin, if the Islanders make the playoffs, Vasilevsky, where there's one goalie. I think a lot of these teams are going to be playing 2 goalies in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. Man, exciting times. The Leafs are good. They just got better with two really solid players joining the roster. Who else will be welcomed into the fold between now and March 3rd? And if it is no one else, will you be as excited as we are at this point? Well, the Leafs have done enough. I guess, Mike, time will tell. Like the content, please subscribe to the channel. I'm very repetitive about this, but we have so many thousands of people who enjoy our content, or we believe they do, and they are not linked to us through a subscription. It's free. Go ahead. Subscribe to the Leafs Convo on YouTube, and then don't forget, we're on your favorite podcast platform, turning out the shows weekly. Just like the last couple of days, there's always a bonus show here and there, and I'm sure we'll do a few more as March 3rd approaches. Mike, before we go, hockeybuzz.com. Obviously your work, I can thank you very much for laying out the groundwork for what turned out to be a deal that you predicted would happen. I assume you're breaking that down and then just laying out some ideas of what could come next at hockeybuzz.com.
Yeah, tomorrow will be, looking back at the game against Chicago. I don't think there's going to be much of a change in the lineup. But looking forward to the game against Buffalo and how O'Reilly and Acciari will be utilized by Sheldon Keefe.
This is dated, but is this Källgren's game, or are they going to give Samsonov a night off? They don't necessarily need him to play against Chicago, do they?
It all depends on how Samsonov feels. If they said he was feeling better, but for him to play in Chicago tonight, he would fly separate from the team. I have a feeling they'll probably just say go with Källgren, have Wall back up, and then Samsonov will play in Buffalo on Tuesday.
I like it. I like it. Will these guys turn out to be a champion, Stanley Cup champion foursome of netminders? who knows? But I mean, they can all eat up minutes, and they're all good goaltenders. And I'm just excited, guys. I know OGs and converts, you feel the same way. Super Strike 9, yes, certainly a great combo. Everybody's in a good mood, including Mr. P. But for how long? So stay tuned, Michael, and have a great podcast later on today. Yeah, just enjoy it. We'll probably chat with some of you guys on social media during the Hawks game tonight. So for Mike, I'm Norm. Talk to you guys soon.